Welcome to another Service Management Leadership Podcast. I have David Cannon on with me, and we have a special episode. David had an idea, and I said, I'll trust you, David. And I don't know what's coming, and this is going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. David, how goes it?
It goes very well. Thank you, Jeffrey. And so the idea is this. Every week, and in fact, several times a week, we get to hear you on a podcast. And I love your podcasts. I love your guests. I love hearing what everyone has to say. But, I got to thinking that who is Jeffrey Tefertiller? And, you are so good about promoting your guests and listening to what they have to say. And I really think it's time that in one of these interviews, we got to know you a bit better. So today I would like to interview you on your own podcast.
Awesome. That's fine. Yeah, I'm an open book. I've made a lot of good decisions and a lot of bad decisions in my life. And I'm open to talking about all those. I'm glad my wife and children aren't here because they probably have the long scroll of all the decisions that especially my son, of the decisions that, I could have made differently. And so, let's talk.
Right. So I think let's start at the beginning. What are your roots? Where do you come from? And then let's talk about how you got here.
All right. So I grew up in the Midwest of the U.S. My father, who grew up on a sharecropper farm, tenant farmer, grew up very poor, worked as a refinery worker for 35 or whatever years. So I grew up middle class, lower middle class. Soccer player, basketball player. David's met me. I don't look like most soccer players or football players if you are in Europe. But, I played and worked my way through college. And what was really interesting is I was an okay student, but I never studied. And so when I tell my kids, you need to study, they think I'm being hypocritical, but I'm really saying, don't make the mistakes I made, because I did as little as possible to get by. But one day when I was probably 27 or 28, the light flicked on for me. And I'm like, I got to do stuff great. I want to pursue excellence at everything. And which is a weird epiphany if you ever have that, where you go from how can we skate by with as little as possible to doing things in excellent manner. And so in 94, which was, I was several years into this when I had the epiphany, but in 94, I started an asset management MSP with my twin brother. And so if you think about back in the 90s, assets were worth a ton. And those of you who are old folks, you all remember like the IBM token ring, memory being expensive. So we helped organizations with their asset life cycles, all that sort of thing, only because they cared about it to resell, not risk or any of that other stuff. So our first client was Mutual of Omaha. I'm old enough to remember the Wild Kingdom show and all that stuff in the US. And so it was June of 1994. We went on for 16 years. It was a good time to split. I went into corporate life at an electric utility. So during that time, the 16 years, we had a huge client, a huge hospitality, think fast food restaurant chain in the US, where we managed 1,000, 1,500 of their stores. So you think of all the service desk, all the field engineers, all of that stuff. And they only sent it to us because nobody else wanted it. Many of these were franchisees who had 30-year-old equipment back in the early 2000s, if you can imagine that. So we managed their code, all that stuff, but it was a pain because nobody else wanted to do it, right? So they said, hey, we'll let these guys do it, which gave me a start into service management because we were trying to pursue excellence, but didn't know what ITIL was, in the 90s and into the 2000s. And so I left there in 2010 and went to an electric utility and helped them spin up change management, configuration management as they put in a tool. Then from there, my service management stuff is history. Got my ITIL 3 expert in 2014, left the utility in 2018, went to KPMG, where I was the director over service management for their internal, had some stories there. I tell them on the podcast. Left there right before the pandemic. Everybody, David, I tell this story often and you'll probably laugh, but I left there right before the pandemic, said, I'm going to strike out on my own. And that was January, 2 months before the pandemic. And, I have so much to be thankful for to make it almost 2 years through this, met a lot of great relationships like yourself. I have a lot to be thankful for to be able, we've been through a lot in these 2 years to be where we are.
Now, a couple of things that you started doing, one of which is the podcast, of course. And recently you had a podcast which downloaded 10,000.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
How did you get onto that idea? What is the reason for you doing this podcast? Because it is a really good resource, I think, for people like me. I love listening to it.
Well, thank you. I started doing, so when I was at the electric utility, and I don't mean this as anything negative, I met some great people there, but they didn't work the 50, 60 hours that I was used to. So in 2016, I started doing consulting on the side. 2017, I spun up a YouTube channel. But then, so after I left KPMG, I was like, I need to curry more relationships with people in the industry. I need to learn, because people look at you, look at me. I won't project this onto you, David, but they look at me and they think I know it all. And I'm like, no, I need to learn. I need to have these conversations and learn from people whose perspectives differ than mine, whose backgrounds are different than mine. That's why I always ask people about their background, because it colors how they viewed the world. And I want to learn how, like a subtlety, you're going to laugh at this. Different parts of the world, especially depending on their ITSM tool called the service catalog, that word means different things. I would never have known that, right? And so there's a lot of stuff that I've really learned through this podcast, make some great relationships. But it just happened one day. I said, I'm going to start a podcast. Because there are a lot of really good people doing really great things, and I wanted to shine the light on them. And if you think about it, there aren't any independent, there's some tool-centric podcasts and there's some organizational-centric podcasts like ITSMF and Axelos, which are very good. But there wasn't any independent Joes, so to speak, or Jeffries doing this. And I just was like, hey, let's try to shine the light on these people who are in these roles, doing it every day. Like our third guest was Steve Heyman, who does problem management for Bank of America. Now, you think about that, that's a tough role. And there are other people doing problem management elsewhere. Why not gain from Steve's experience? And there's, I try to mix people in the industry versus people in corporate, try to keep that mix where it's balanced. But I've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed meeting people like yourself, David, through this. And I feel like I've been the beneficiary of the podcast, and I hope it's been, a blessing to others.
Right. Now, talking about helping others and getting your voice out there, you have, of course, written a number of books, of which I have copies. I can't show you because they're on this device here, but I have found, I've read a couple of your books already, and I found them to be really to the point and very helpful and very practical, and yet also very profound. What got you to writing these books? I mean, here all of a sudden you've got these ITIL books and you got all these books out there, and then suddenly you have Jeffrey Tefertiller coming up with these books. And where did they come from? What were they for?
Well, the first one I wrote was ITSM for Leaders, because I have a dirty secret for the ITSM world. Most of the leaders, the people over those groups, have no ITSM background. And that's been true for the last decade, in my experience. You may disagree. but there are people managing service management and service operations that don't know what those were. So my first book was ITSM for Leaders. This is what change management, incident management, this is what they are. So if a leader wanted that, that's fine. Second one was how to implement or improve your service management. And I had every single V3 process, a workflow, metrics, everything. So it's just very, very tactical, probably too tactical, but it's like a handbook, right? Then books 3 and 4 were for the cloud, and 4 taking the same premise for book 1, applying it to cloud, and the 4th one was applying it to an outsourced world, because I wrote those in like 2017. And for me, that was a few years ago, I thought cloud and the outsourced world were the biggest obstacles, opportunities for the service management world. And then I wrote one on business continuity, and the last one, the ITIL 4 book. But the first 4 are on Amazon for 99 cents. I'm happy for people to look at those and tell me what you think. But I just, they're mainly like, how do I help people? How do I help people get from here to there? And that's where the practical, I dislike, David, you get me on a soapbox here, but I dislike when we talk theory without having a practical. I have a friend that says, so what now? We always beat on the so what, but we don't help them with the what now, how to apply it. And so do my books lean more for the what now? Probably. And I'm okay with that. There's a lot of theory books. There's a lot of really, really good theory books. And when we talk ITIL 4, I'm not so sure there's that much that say, here's how you put that into your environment. Here's how you incorporate it. Because we talk, what is ITIL 4? What is this? What is it not? We don't talk, how do I use that? How do I apply it to my organization? And that's what I tried to do on all of them.
Right. And in the last book that you wrote, which 2 things about that book. One is I think it has the best summary of ITIL 4 that I think I've read anywhere, including in ITIL 4.
Thank you.
And I think the second thing is it is just so practical. It takes a look at where you are right now, and it says, well, what do you need? Where do you need to go from here? And it's a perspective that I haven't seen anywhere else, and I think it's really, really helpful. ITIL is best practices, right? It's things that other people have done. Great. What do I do? And I think you've really nailed that, I think, for people.
Well, thank you. It's one guy sitting in his office pounding, trying to figure out what does it look like, so that's why I appreciate these conversations, because I would be a fool to think that I don't have blind spots. You know what I'm saying? And so I asked 5 people to review it, give me their feedback, even around the world, just because vernacular, I didn't want to be offensive to some just by using Midwestern US, nomenclature. I wanted to be able to do good work. So I appreciate those 5 for helping me, and your kind words as well.
I didn't think that anybody in the Midwest could have offensive language.
Well, when I drive down the highway, they all tell me I'm number 1, whatever that means.
Right. I want to get back to that. Why books? Most people, if they want to learn something, will read, they'll get on the phone, they'll go to a conference, they'll learn. What got you onto writing books? Because that is probably one of the most difficult, challenging, personality changing things you can do. Why did you write books?
Well, they're easy for me if they're straight in my head. If I have all the facts, if I have my thoughts straight in my head, like the business continuity one, I wrote in 10 days. It was straight in my head. And the other ones, I did a lot of research, like if the ITIL 4 book, I did a lot of research on why did things fail in the past, right? If you're, think logically, audience here, but if your ITIL V3 program is struggling, you need to address that before you move to ITIL 4, because it's hard to do that. David, you feel free to disagree, but why books? This may be an unpopular view, but I think books are more personal for the writer than doing videos or podcasts, because you pour yourself into those. You've written more books than I have probably, and you know how personal they are. You know what I'm saying? Like, you put your thoughts into it, you write it down, you go, oh, that's garbage, you throw it away. And they're personal versus, a lot of my podcasts are pretty brief. I don't get to tell stories. Like, I have a story, and this is still true in the book, that I compared I'll say it on the air since he won't listen to it. My son's 3 hairs on his mustache, thinking that he's mature and he has one of those Tom Selleck full mustaches. That's personal to me, because that's how some people view the maturity of their ITSM program. They're like him with those 3 hairs, and we all went through that stage. And, we kind of look at them in the mirror and we kind of, oh, look how great they are. But that's how some people's ITSM programs work. So I was trying to be very personal for me, so I poured out through the books.
And something it was either you or somebody else said to me is like, if you want to know something, start teaching it. But if you really want to know it, write a book about it.
Oh.
What have you learned through the book writing experience? What were the fundamental lessons that were most important for you?
I have to know everything really well, because there are people that know things really well but cannot articulate it. But there's no way you can articulate it without knowing it well, especially in writing. Because I think of the old quotes, I think it was Mark Twain that said, if you want to write something really well, it takes a lot more time. And, to be concise with your words and say, does that word mean what I really want it to mean? And go through all of that is really a personal, difficult thing. But for me, books hit people differently than podcasts or videos. And I also think there's a different audience. There are people that will consume 5 hours of 3-minute videos, but will never pick up a book that takes them an hour and a half to read. You know what I mean? Like, it's just different strokes for different folks. And, I like books. I like I like the book, I like your Ditz book. And if you ask me, like, non-ITIL books, I really enjoy the From Good to Great book that's probably 30 years old. I think of other books that have really impacted how I think. So if you take the Good to Great principle and you think what, it taken in my brain of, we got to do excellence, those meshed. And my kids I won't say hate, they dislike me bringing up that book all the time, just because I'm like, a lot of people are good, but good's the enemy of being great. And I'm afraid that that's been me for half my life.
Talking about great. One of the things that I've noticed about you online and in your podcasts is you are a tremendously encouraging, supportive person. I know that if I put something out on LinkedIn, there is going to be a positive comment from you on it within seconds. I see how you write about others. I see how you talk about them. I hear on the podcast how you promote others. And I want to recognize that. I want to recognize your role in encouraging people, number one. But number two, that says there's something really special about you. Where does this approach come from? What is this philosophy? What is your philosophy about working with people in podcasts, on LinkedIn? What is this? Where does this come from? Most people happy to tear other people down, cause the debate, but not you. You're there, you're promoting, you're encouraging, you're giving positive feedback. What's that about?
This world, in my view, likes to push down. It likes to divide. I want to encourage. I want to unite. I think we're all on this spinning globe together. And if I can help people on their journey, all the better. I posted recently, we all drink from wells we did not dig. And we have to try to dig wells for other people. And I'll tell you two of the stories I get the most comfort of, David. One is, and I won't use the gentleman's name, but he got a job as a manager over ITIL stuff, service management, just by the knowledge he gained from watching my 2-minute videos. You know what I mean? Like, don't ask me what the interview process was, but it's just one of those that I'm like, I'm happy to be there, because it changes somebody's lives. And there's another gentleman, another part of the world, who gets a new job. He calls me. He's like, how do I do this right? And we jump on a Zoom call, and how do we do these things right? I want to be that person. I'm to that age where I know I won't live forever. My legacy, I hope, is what the impact I made on others, and it's positive. Like, this world has a lot of people that'll tear you down. Not many that'll prop people up. And I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy.
And I think you certainly are. I mean, I hear time and again, I connect with people, I chat with them, and they say, yeah, if I have a question, I reach out to Jeffrey, and we sit and chat. He's a sounding board for me. He's somebody I trust. And I mean, I've tried to stir it up with you once or twice. We've talked about subjects, and I'll say, well, I disagree with this point of view, and you're like, yeah, but think about it this way. We've spoken about service level management, for example, and you see the positive side of things, and you remind people of the positive side of things, even of things they don't agree with, and I find that really helpful. And yeah, I want to point that out. And for those listening to the podcast, you go and check out Jeffrey's posts, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
David, I think it's like a lot of things in this world. We agree on 95%, and we choose to argue over the 5%. And that service level management disagreement, we both agree that how service level management is being conducted now is wrong. We may disagree on what the right path is, but I'm open. I'm happy to learn from your thoughts, because maybe it helps my thoughts get more mature. Like, I feel like, so I bring up my kids. I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. They can disagree with me anytime. They can say, hey, Dad, you didn't handle that one well. And let's talk about it. Because I don't think any of us are too big that we cannot be questioned, that we cannot have those honest conversations of, how can I do better? How can I help you do better? And if that's my lens as I see the world, then I want to help everybody do better. And if that makes sense at all.
It totally makes sense. And I want to throw something else in on this point. I think what you're doing is setting a really good precedent for the way in which the rest of us professionals in the industry need to be behaving. Especially now, there are just so many frameworks out there, opposing points of view. And I've noticed in many cases, the rhetoric has become pretty heated and accusatory, and I've got to make you look bad so I look good, kind of thing. This is not good enough. This approach is, my approach is better. And I think what we need in this industry right now is a little bit more of what you're talking about, of people willing to listen, of people looking at the positive side of what people are bringing, of people looking for points of agreement rather than points of disagreement, people trying to find commonality instead of the things that put them apart. And I certainly appreciate that about everything that you bring, is what this industry needs right now. And I hope that I certainly have taken that to heart. I am certainly exercising that a lot more in my professional relationships. And I certainly hope that people watching this podcast or listening to this podcast take this very much to heart. There is so much good out there, but we're losing it because we're so worried that somebody's going to take something away from what we think is important, and they're not. It's there. So thank you for that.
I do think, let me jump in. I think social media has caused much of that, and we want to trumpet our success at the demise of others. But it also means that mine is better than yours, mentality.
Mm.
And I think of who loses. It's all those poor people and those poor companies that are trying to figure out the right path. They
Right.
lose, right? I mean, they're the losers. When we argue and disagree, how do we put ITIL 4 into practice and we have these theoretical arguments? They lose. It's kind of like
Absolutely.
when somebody uses the word implement for ITIL 4 and everybody gets on them. Who loses? The people that are trying to implement it. Sorry to use sarcasm there, but
yeah, no, absolutely.
Anyway, I just say, I think, we have to, we in the industry support many millions around the world who are trying to do their job. And our job is to help them do their job better. And that's the view that I want to attack the world at.
Great. Just to reinforce, I mean, we've said this before. I mean, organizations are all about groups of people doing things for other people.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to. If we're focused on these religious arguments about frameworks and so on, it doesn't do anything for the people, does it? So, so thank you for that. And from personally, thank you for that, because it really gives me hope and it gives me direction. And you have been a model for me on this, and I want to say I appreciate that. So, but let's move on before I embarrass you.
You have. I'm just I live in a state. Those of you that live elsewhere, I live in a state where everybody thinks we're backwards and everything. And so I'm just this humble, oversized dude that just tries to do the best he can.
I think you do. And now let's switch gears slightly. We spoke about a personal philosophy now, but let's talk about more of a professional philosophy. In everything that you've been involved in the last year, 2 years, what for you are the most important trends in the industry right now?
And I'm stealing this from our last podcast, David, is that the rates of change are picking up. And whatever you think is normal today will not be normal tomorrow. And you have to accept that as fact. I'm saying that to everybody, no matter what it is, cloud, RPA, whatever it is, the rates of change are picking up. And for an example, I remember just a few years ago, we would have project life cycles that were a year, 2 years old, long. Now you get laughed at if they're 6 months long, right? Because everything has to be so iterative. So I want to say that the rates of change, which also if I direct it back to your book on digital and IT strategy, your strategy has to be nimble. I don't like using the A word there, that it has to be nimble in that things will change. We should have learned that things will change. And so that's number one. I really appreciate the focus on the cloud that you brought in your book. And I also want to mention how to do the outsourcing better. And I think those three are the trends that I see. I see the rates of change. I see some of that being cloud. And I see others, when I say do outsourcing better, I'm not saying I know what the answer is. I just mean, has it impact service management, just like cloud, we have to do better. Whether you want to talk service level, service costing, whatever it is, we have to do it better.
Great. I certainly agree with you on those. Now, what do you feel are the most important tools or keys to being able to deal with those?
So I think you have three, and this, I'm repeating some from that ITIL 4 book, The New Frontier. So one, you have to have leadership support. You have to have great leadership that's buying into what you're selling. Because if not, you're just, it's difficult. I've been there, and I'm sure most people have. So you have to have leadership support. You have to have, second, you have to have internal expertise or acquire that expertise externally. Because there's no way you're going to address, for example, service management in the cloud if you don't have quality service management people. Understanding the services, the configuration items. And then the last is having a plan that is nimble, because something's going to happen. I mean, we have to, this last year or two has to be ingrained in our mind that we have to be prepared for something to happen. And when you ball all of that together, you're in a collision course with your business continuity and DR. It's now, you can make a great case 2 years from now will be included in your configuration management database or in your service management program, because we have these services delineated. Now, how do we support them, keep them continuous? How do we help them recover quickly? I mean, like everything's converging so quickly.
Go back on a couple of your points, because you've mentioned three things that are just hugely important. And the first being leadership support. Traditionally, ITSM has kind of been pushed down by leaders, right? So it's like, okay, well, I've got people that do that. The CIO, you want to speak about ITSM to the CIO, you go and speak to the people who are in operations. You go and speak to operations director, you go and speak to service desk manager, et cetera, et cetera. But service management really is the job of the CIO, isn't it? So how do we get CIOs more engaged in making that a core part of what they do and what they think about?
I think some of it's understanding. Most of them come from pure technical backgrounds, so they're developers, they're architects, they have that mindset. So they see it from a tool problem. And this is another one of my soapboxes is we in service management have to consider everything from a business problem that technology, people, and process or practice solve. It's not a business problems are not tool problems to solve alone. And I think many leaders, they see everything as a technology problem to solve. And so they miss that other expertise piece. And that's the knowledge that I would request that they try to acquire.
Then on your second point, you did something very interesting to me, which is you talked about the people. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that point, you said, and their services and configuration. So people, services, and configuration are tied in your mind. You want to expand on that a bit?
Well, most CMDBs, the attributes that they're the most efficient on are the manual people data. Who owns it? Who owns that CI? Those are the tough conversations you have. But then you also get into your business continuity aspects of that same CI, because I still need those same people to keep it continuous and recover it. But in this world that we're pushing technology, we have to take a step back and say, it's our people that enable this technology. It's our people that we need really good people. And this is a counter thought to most people. I really don't believe in the great resignation like it's being pushed out, because there are a lot of people that just can't quit their jobs. They would love to, they just can't. But it doesn't take away from the fact that we need great people who are excited and happy to do their jobs and have a great experience with their organization to be able to be success. Because we've all worked with those people who are negative Nellies and have been there 20 years, and their whole job is to pull people down. And that's a leader's role into helping those people be satisfied. And hopefully I answered your question well enough, but I think that people aspect is missed as well as the process aspect.
So I'm going to put something to you, which I think I hear you saying. It's your point. So no, you're not answering my question. It's your point. What I think I hear you saying is that people first is it's the people who understand what the services are and what they do. Anyone who puts their trust in technology to tell them that is actually probably going to come up short.
Yeah,
it's the people who understand how things work and who they're working with and what they're trying to achieve. It's not the technology that does that. And
exactly, yeah. Because we've talked about this off the air, and I'll say it on the air. I think that building out a CMDB, building out a service catalog is more art than science. I mean, you need expertise in the people aspect to enable the technology, the science aspect. And if you flip on a tool and you think it's going to know, it'll know your stacks, your application to your database, to your server, it'll know that. But it won't know, hey, we need to group these because our finance people see this as one service and we're going to charge back with this or have SLAs because of this. Packaging those up, it takes somebody that knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think, you know, for me, I think that's been one of my learnings is it's about the people. You know, for example, we talk about service mapping. There are certainly tools that will give you service architectures and tell you which databases talk to which applications. I think we've spoken about this before, but it's only the people who understand what happens when those services are all running effectively, what they do, what impact they have on the organization. So if you take people out of the equation and just let the tools do it, you're really shortchanging yourself.
Right. I worked at electric utility, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
There's three main areas of an electric utility. There's generation, you know, the big power plants. There's transmission. So if you're driving along the highway, you see these extra tall electricity poles. That's moving it from where it's generated to the substation in your neighborhood. And then there's distribution from your neighborhood, the substation, to your house. That tool is not going to know the difference between your ITSM tool is not going to know which servers are for generation versus distribution. Somebody's got to say, you know, these are grouped together. These are what we can, you know, consider a service.
Right. Right. So if I can switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
What now? What next? What are you busy with at the moment, and what are you planning?
Oh my! So this is a loaded question, and those of us that are independent consultants or small companies, what next is you never know. And I use a phrase with my family. You know, it changes someone when you pray for your daily bread. You know, like that next thing is just different. And so what's next? I'm learning as much as I can on experience management, especially as it intersects with service management. You and I may disagree on what the answer should be, but I think most people would agree that there is some systematic flaw in what's going on. And so I want to learn about the flaw as much as I can, research that, and then help me have better thought processes for the solution. So there's that. Also, what I do a lot is help you. I know this is not you'll laugh, but this is not a secret considering our just recent conversation here, but help organizations that are putting in tooling to help them understand how to do it right. Because I think a lot of organizations, they put in a tool and they expect, hey, it's going to work great without the people being equipped, without the processes, all that sort of thing. And for research on that, I've done a lot of research, and 60 to 70% of the people are unhappy with their current IT asset management or IT service management tool. And I see that as a business problem, that it was not done correctly to solve the business problem. And so we have to get down to the level of how do we solve that as a business problem. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And I think there are some minor disagreements between you and I. I wouldn't even call them disagreements. I think we largely agree on making service level management what it really should be.
Right.
You know, which is to deliver the right level of service so that people can get their work done and make the organization successful. And I think what you're bringing to this as well is not just the performance, but also the experience component of this, right?
Yeah, think about this. Almost every place that has SLAs, the SLAs are met 90-something% of the time, yet stakeholders are unhappy. It tells you there's something systematically wrong with how those SLAs are architected.
Right. So far more than just being a podcast celebrity, you are actually someone who gets in there, gets your hands dirty, and helps organizations to deal with some of these issues and make them more successful.
Yes. And so I fit in a weird world, David. So we talked about your technical background. I flew by on my background. I have a BS in finance and MBA. I only understand technology from owning the company and managing it from a service management point of view. So everything I say, everything I write is through a business lens of technology. Asset management is natural to me because I think of technology assets through a business lens. In the same way, change, CMDB, those areas are natural to me because to me, those are business problems more than incident and such.
Right. So I'm going to say something which you cannot say on your podcast, and that is, for those of you looking for help in answering these questions and just getting your organization on track with service management, Jeffrey is the guy you need to be talking to. Jeffrey is the guy whose services you need to be buying because he really gets how to make this stuff work. So, and you have my support and recommendation in this.
Thank you.
So
David.
please get on the phone, get on email, and Jeffrey is just a great person to get to know, to bounce ideas off, and to help you out.
Thank you, David. I always appreciate our conversation. The next time I'm in your neck of the woods, I'll look you up as well. I live in this area of the country people don't go to. He does, and so I think we'll also see each other soon at at a mutual place.
Yes, we have conferences that we hang out at, and that's always fun to get together. But you do live just down the road from me, or up the road from me, I guess. So so we will probably hang out somewhere in some shady joint.
Oh, I create enough shade.
Jeffrey, it has been just really a privilege to be hosting you on your own podcast, and really just love this opportunity. And thank you for your insights and for the role that you play in encouraging so many of us. Thank you,
David. I am thoroughly embarrassed, and but I thank you for your kindness. I thank you for our relationship, and here's to many more years of this.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.